In this video, I'm going to be covering shield tanking. I'm going to be going over the different module types and the implants and everything that you would technically need to understand about shield tanking, so that hopefully after this video you have a better understanding of the difference between buffer tank, active tank, passive tank, and you know what to look for as far as implants and as far as when you're looking at your fit window and what your ship is actually capable of doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Marshall here to illustrate the modules and the rigs as we go through them. Most ships are purpose built. They'll either be for a armor tank or they'll be for a shield tank. A lot of shield tank ships have more mid slots because that's where most of your shield tanking modules will go, and the lowers are ships with more lower slots are generally more for armor tank. You can check this by actually going to the info screen on your ship, and it'll actually tell you up here under the ship characteristics whether or not it is armor or shield. A general rule of thumb is if you see a ship with a lot of low slots and very little mids, it's probably an armor tank, and then vice versa. If it has a lot of mid slots, it's probably a shield tank. Shield boosters are exactly what an active tank would look like. When you activate these boosters, these are going to require a capacitor, and they are going to give you shield HP back over a certain amount of time, and they require to be activated, so they fall under the active shield tanking category. As you can see, it uses a lot of capacitor, so you have to kind of, if you want to be cap stable, you have to be compensating for that. And then also you have shield boost amplifiers. These are passive modules that will increase the amount of HP per cycle. So 563 HP with and 414 without over the same amount of time. Another thing that is fitted with active tanking, and we'll just kind of talk about active tanking a little bit here, is going to be your shield hardeners. You have multi-spectrum, and you have also just different individual ones that cover their own individual profiles. So for instance, a multi-spectrum shield hardener 2, depending on skills, going to give you about 29.3% across the board, as opposed to if, let's say, you go to just a generic kinetic shield hardener, it's going to give you around 50% on that. So generally speaking, in PvE, if I'm in Caldari space, I'm doing PvE, I know that a lot of the damage coming through is going to be kinetic or thermal. So if you know what you're going to be fighting, if you know the damage you're going to be taking, it's better to kind of specialize your resistances towards that, because that's going to actually end up increasing your overall EHP towards that type of damage. Now for PvP, Omni Tank, or trying to fill in your holes on your ship, is going to be your priority. But a lot of PvP fits are more buffer passive tank, because a lot of Logi is going to be going with them. Also, I want to explain the difference between the different types of shield reps. This is more for new players. There are basically remote shield reps. These are going to be for going in your high slots. This is what you're going to use to boost someone else. Whenever you see a term like emissions, any skill or implant that has emissions terminology is going to affect remote repair. This is not going to repair your ship, it's going to repair others. So this would be your remote, and this would be your local. The shield booster in your mid is going to be for you. So any skill or implant that has the word emissions in it is not going to benefit a local shield booster. This would just be for you. This is more for like Logi, or if you're fitting a ship to boost someone else's shield. Let's go back to extenders. Extenders are exactly what they sound like. They're going to increase your actual EHP. So as you see here, if I add this extender onto here, I go up to 12.7, or about 12, a little over 12,000, almost 13,000. But without it, I'm at 62. And these numbers are actually really important to understand, because this is your overall HP, and then this is your time to recharge. Basically, if your shield is seen at 0, how long it would take to go from 0% all the way up to 100%. This is your recharge time. This is your active. This would be your actual recharge per second. That's your EHP per second, and this is a percentage. And you can figure this out actually by taking your total EHP and dividing it by your recharge time, and that'll give you the actual per second EHP, or the per second HP on your active regen. Your EHP is actually a combination of your total hit points and your resistances. So whenever you look at this EHP number, That's usually what's going to be your effective hit points. So if you have really high, let's say, kinetic damage resist, and you're taking kinetic damage, you're going to effectively have more EHP because you're mitigating a lot of damage coming through with that resistance. As I start showing you some of these other modules, you'll see a lot of these values change, and when we start talking about buffer tank and active tank versus passive tank, I'll explain what's actually going on with these numbers and some of the things to look out for. With this extender on, you can see it doubles, so show goes from 6 to 13 on our HP per second, but our total time to recharge is still the same because that number up here is based off of a percentage. So we're actually not getting more HP passively recharge a second. We're actually just getting the same amount. We just have a bigger pool of shield HP. Going on to the next module type would be resistance amplifiers. There's no multi-spectrum for this. What these are passive modules that will boost individual damage profiles. So for this one, I get 41% EM damage resist on this Tech 2. So with it, I get 65%. Without it, it's back at the base 40. And you can stack these as well up to a certain point. You're going to get diminishing returns if you try to stack more too many of more of the same thing. So you see like 83. So having 2, I'm at 77, but then going up from 2 to 3, I go to 83. And then if you keep adding more, each subsequent one you add, you're going to get less added up, right? So if I fill this whole thing all the way up, it's only 86. So I take that off, still 86. If I take that off, it's 85. You see what I'm saying? So you don't want to overstack a lot of this stuff because of diminishing returns. You get less value the more you add. And one of the skills actually that helps with the amp itself is going to be anything in your shield that's going to have the compensation terminology. So explosive shield compensation is going to increase it's going to give you a 5% bonus to the resistance per level. So you want to try, if you're going to be using amplifier, you want to get at least like level 3 or 4 for the corresponding one, just to help get more out of it. And then you have shield rechargers. This is going to go more into the passive tank kind of arena. If I add this, it's not going to actually increase my shield HP, but it's actually just going to it's going to decrease actually my total time to recharge. So I actually get more HP per second. So if I start adding more of these, you can see it's 10. I still have the same amount of HP, but I'm recharging at a higher rate. There's also modules for shield in the low slots as well. These flux coils are going to increase your shield recharge rate, but they're going to lower the maximum shield capacity. So for instance, if we're trying to do like a buffer passive tank, or a passive tank with a buffer tank, having flux coils is kind of like counterintuitive because it's going to lower our HP as well. This is useful in PvP if you have Logi on field because it makes their reps more significant. Because, you know, we don't have a whole lot of HP, but we have a really, really high per second recharge rate. So if we take let's say we take 3,000 or like 4,000 damage, you know, all at once, we're probably going to pop because we just don't have the capacity to withstand that. One of the things I use the most for this instead of flux coils would be your power relays. As you can see here, with the power relay, it's going to decrease our capacitor recharge. So our capacitor is going to recharge at a lower rate, but our shield is going to recharge at a higher rate. So if let's say we add just all these into lows, you'll see we went from like 2,300 seconds to go from 0 to 100% shield. Now we're down to like 320 seconds. Same amount of HP, but we're getting more value per second on that. So I'll give you an idea like what a popular or what a configuration for passive tank would be when it comes to terms of like low and mids. I like to do like passive tank with a little bit of a buffer in there for the most part. So I usually try to take like shield rechargers, throw like 3 of these on here. Doesn't increase our HP, but it gives us a little bit more time off of our total recharge. And then I'll go to lows and I'll actually add power relays in. And what this is, it gives us even more reduction on our total time. And then what I want to do is, because I want to actually like be able to tank a lot of like damage I don't want to be sitting anywhere close to like 30% shield when I stable out. So what I want to do is I want to add a buffer in. So I'm going to go and grab a shield extender. And when I add this shield extender, it's going to double my EHP, that would be considered our buffer. And as you can see, it looks like we're getting more HP per second, but we're actually not. We're just getting more HP. So it's going to be the same calculation. The more HP we add, we're still going to be recharging it at the same rate because it is a percentage. So a passive tank would look something like this, where you're kind of splitting between the lows and the highs, and then your buffer. Next thing I'm going to go over is rigs, because depending on what you're trying to do, you know, the rigs are going to help you significantly on trying to just like fine tune your tank. Now, your safeguard, this is going to be giving you a little bit more capacitor breathing room. It's going to reduce the capacitor need for the modules, but it's going to increase your signature radius, so keep that in mind. The charge optimizer here, our economizer, it is going to reduce the power need for all shields, but as you can see on most shield ships, we don't have a whole lot of power need, so you probably won't use that one too much. The defense core extender is going to essentially just add more shield HP. So if you had to marry two modules with rigs, your shield extenders and your defense field extenders are going to do essentially the same thing. It's going to give you a little bit more punch for your total, I guess, pool of shield HP. And then the purgers. The purgers are essentially going to give you more recharge. So it's going to improve recharge rate at the expense of signature radius. So if you had to compare these rigs with modules, it's going to be these. And so that would be a good, like, if you ever see anybody that's running like, you know, a crazy amount of recharge here, and then they're running like field extenders, they're using the field extenders as basically their buffer for the most part. So that's what's happening there. You just have to decide essentially what you're trying to accomplish, because in my experience, you want a lot. If you want to go passive tank, you want to increase your overall shield HP, just so you have kind of like that buffer zone to work with. Moving down the list here, operational solidifier. This is going to be for active tank. What this is going to do is going to reduce the duration of the booster cycles. And you wouldn't use this for a passive tank. This would be if you had a shield booster. And I will illustrate that. We'll throw a shield booster on here. Let's throw a large Tech 2 on. Turn that rig off. As you can see here, for this large shield extender 2, we're going to get 414 HP every 4 seconds. If we put this rig on, we're not going to get the same amount of HP, but it's going to be 3.2 seconds. So we have a little bit faster cycle on that. If we add another one, 2.6 seconds. So you're going to be using these rigs if you want to get more efficiency out of your active tank for your shield booster. The next would be your reinforcers. There's one for each damage profile, and they're exactly what, you know, they're going to increase resistance for their type. So this is a large EM shield. So you see we go from 40% here up to 61. So if you're trying to fill a hole with rigs, you can use those as well. Another thing to keep in mind is when it comes to shield boosters, they are cap intensive. And the other thing to note is you don't have to run them full time. If you do have, or if you're in a situation for like PvE or whatever, you want like what would be considered permatank. That's essentially when you're like cap stable, when you can actually run your booster all the time, and essentially you can just endlessly tank, you know, the content. But there are some differences between like the shield booster and like the armor repair, right? So a shield booster, whenever you activate it, it's going to immediately give you that HP back. Now with an armor repair, when you activate it, it's not going to give you any repaired armor HP until the end of that cycle, till it reaches the end and it's about to cycle over again. So what that really means is like you can technically turn on and off your shield booster at demand when you need it, but you have to anticipate more with armor repair. But I'll go over armor repair in its own separate video. But just keep in mind, you don't have to run this full time. And you don't have to, you know, have your shield completely at 100% either, because just there's a really interesting thing that people don't really talk about too much, and we're going to go over it too about the shield recharge. The way that shield recharge works is the more you lose shield HP, your shield recharge is going to increase up to a certain point. So if you watch my like rattlesnake video where I'm doing the fob, you'll notice that my shield, I'll lose shield HP all the way down to like 69%, and then it just stabilizes. And that's an indicator of how much damage is on field. Because as I lose shield HP, my shield regen goes up. Now, the important thing to note here is once you go below 25% shield HP, the recharge rate drops off dramatically. So if you're out there and you're tanking and you're passive tanking and you start to drop below 30%, I would just warp off if you can, because you're essentially not passively tanking enough. Because the second you actually drop below 25% shield, your recharge is just going to plummet. It's going to just go into the floor. So that's why you'll notice on a lot, if you watch a lot of videos of people using like a passive tank, something like PvE or whatever, they will take a considerable amount of damage up to a certain point. Because basically, the damage on field and the amount of a passive tank you can do, they're going to meet in the middle somewhere. So there's like not a lot of damage on field. You're probably going to stabilize somewhere in the like 80% shield. If you're at 80% shield, it's probably going to stabilize there. The more damage on field, you're going to stabilize at a lower percentage up until the point where you drop below 25%, and then you basically just lose all of your regen as well. So it's completely normal if you go out and you're passive tanking and you come down to like 70% or 60% and then it just stays there. That's why that's happening, because there is that gradual regen increase, and then there's that extreme drop off once you drop below 25% shield. Next thing we'll go over is, well, we're going to go over ancillaries as well. Ancils, and these are you get these with armor repairs and with shield boosters. Essentially what these are capacitor free boosters, but what they require are cap booster charges, which are loaded in. What this allows you to do is, if you're getting neuted out and things like that, it allows you to have some sort of active tank going on. But these do have a reload cycle. Once it goes through all the charges that are loaded into it, it's going to take a minute for them to reload before you can start using them again. The other thing to notice here too is the chargers that you have to carry can take up a lot of space. There's a lot of volume here, so you have to make sure you keep that in mind as well. These are more or less used. I use these on like Rorquals or like Capitals and stuff like that, where we have a little bit more, room to carry the charges and stuff like that. But if you're gonna be facing down a lot of neutralizers, active tanking, it just kind of falls apart. If you lose your cap, if you get capped out, your active tank just won't work because you can't, activate the modules. Knowing how to fit your ship is going to be highly dependent on how you actually, or what content you're actually going to be going into. There's some other things I want to talk about too, as far as a couple more modules in the low category. One of them being the power diagnostic system. What these are going to do, you can add these into your lows. This depends on like how your skills are and things like that. These are going to optimize your power grid. They're going to give you a slight boost in power output, and they're going to give you a minor increase in shield recharge and capacitor recharge rate. So what this means is you can add these in to just kind of like fill some gaps if you need to, but it's going to essentially add capacity and also a little bit of recharge rate as well. Another rule here is like if you go to the market and you just type in Gnome, then Gnome is going to be a lot of your shield hardwired implants. You have, we'll start at the bottom here, you have shield upgrades. This one is not used a whole lot because it's just going to reduce power grid need. And depending on certain situations, in most situations, you're not going to have a power grid need. You're probably going to have a CPU issue. But, keep in mind that shield upgrade, Gnome shield upgrade exists. One of the more popular ones used is the shield operation. The shield operation is going to give you boost to your shield recharge rate. So this is going to be an implant for your passive tank. And shield management is going to be shield capacity for a buffer tank. So I end up usually just running both of these for the most part, depending on, I just have like a shield tank clone essentially. So we're gonna go over here, we're gonna go to attribute enhancers. The two we're looking at, and you can mix and match these between high, mid, low, right, but the ones we're looking at here are gonna be crystal This is going to be the crystal set. These are going to increase your boost amount. So this is going to be a implant set for your active tank configuration. It's going to help you get more out of your shield booster. Then you have the Nirvana set. This Nirvana set is going to be for shield hit points. So this would be a buffer implant. So this is something I use for like passive tank. So I don't have to run too many extenders, or I can run purgers over the defense core field extenders. This allows me to get a lot of EHP, or a lot of shield HP from implants, and it gives me more room for recharge on my passive bits as well. And these will there's a hardwire, there's an Omega. These will usually go from like slot 1 to 6, and you can mix and match these between the high grade, low grade, mid grade, and they're all multiplicative. So if you're running, for instance, if you're running like a passive tank, you want to do your Nirvanas and then your shield management and your shield operation. If you're doing like an active tank, you'll want to go crystal with your shield management and shield operation hardwires and things like that. We're going to go over skills now, things that are going to help you in terms of getting a little bit more efficiency on that. So like I said before, if you see any skill with emissions in it, so shield emission systems, capital shield emissions, that's going to be going towards your remote reps, so when you're repping other people. Shield management is a really important one. This is going to give you 5% bonus to shield capacity, so this is going to give you just that buffer as well through skills. You have the energy grade upgrades. This is going to give you a reduction in CPU of modules requiring energy grade upgrades. A lot of your shield modules will benefit from this. So this is how you're going to increase some of your CPU, or decrease your CPU usage, so that you can fit a lot of better tank on ships. The next would be shield upgrades, and this is going to give you 5% reduction in shield upgrade, but it's going to be basically saving you on power grid. Shield operation is going to give you reduction in shield recharge time, and then shield management, we already talked about that one, and things like that. If you're using like active tank, so active tank would be your multi-spectrum shield hardeners or your kinetic shield hardeners or whatever. Tactical shield manipulation will help with that. If you're using shield amps, so EM shield amp 2s or anything like that, you're going to be, there's a skill for each one. There's thermal shield compensation, there's kinetic shield compensation, EM, explosive, all of that. And then shield compensation is just a base, skill. It's going to give you 2% less capacitor need for shield boosters. If you're running an active tank, you 100% want, at least level 4 tactical shield manipulation, and then you want, as high as you can on shield compensation. It's going to help you a lot too. But then all of these are actually, very useful and just giving you a little bit more breathing room. One of the other low slot things you can add to help you out as far as damage mitigation would be your damage controls. These are useful for no matter what you're doing, armor tank, shield tank, whatever. But these essentially are the passive module that's going to give you a resistance profile for shield and armor and hull. So as you can see here, without it, we're at 40 flat across the board for shield. If we add it in, we're at 48. We're also getting resistances for each of the other armor and the structure hit points as well. So adding one of these in, even if you're active tanking, doesn't matter if you're active tanking, buffer tanking, whatever. I try to do damage control. It's usually good business to do that. So I know there was a lot to go over in this video. Hopefully it's not as confusing, and you have a little bit better idea about how shield tanking works and everything like that. And the only other thing I can really add is, like, when you get out there, and you start tanking and doing all that stuff, make sure you have your modules on. Make sure you know how your ship is fitted and how to manipulate it. And a lot of your tanking, a lot of your active tanking, especially with boosters and stuff like that, is just only turn that booster on whenever you need it, because they're really cap intensive. But having the right hardeners and things on and having them active and everything is going to help you out a lot. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.